I want to play this. Gary, this is a little bit out of order here. It's going to be the one called Trump. I think it's called Many Ways. And Gary won't play the whole thing. I'll pull it off here. But I want you to listen. He's going to start answering a question here about the war and where it's going to go. And then he's going to be asked a question, if I'm selecting the right clip here, where he's going to ask, are we going to go back to full-scale war? He's going to actually, for a second, answer honestly. See if you can pick it out.
We just hit them very hard. And I say we hit them 20-1. Every time they hit us, we're going to hit them 20. And we did it last night. They did a little something today, but it was really retribution for last night. They hit actually 3 boats, not 2. And when they hit, we hit back much harder.
Are we returning to a full-scale military conflict, sir?
I don't know. I don't know. We'd win it very quickly. It's another way.
That's it. This is the commander-in-chief, Scott. I just want your view on this. He was asked, are we going to go back to full-scale war? And he said twice, I don't know. And if he doesn't know, who does?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the truth is, Danny, that he's really bad at being president. And I don't even mean like on the big decisions, but just on the day-to-day handling of carrying out his own decisions. He's just, you know, in his first, 2 months in power, when he's in March of 17, he said, I hereby order all troops out of Afghanistan and South Korea. And it was Mattis and Tillerson that told the story, that they turned to each other and said, we're not doing that. But then he never followed up. He didn't get the troops out of Afghanistan until he was gone, a full 4 years later, almost to the day, right? When it was left to Biden to do it and botch it, right? Or that was the deal that he made, was to leave in May. So I'm sorry, I said March, but whatever, right around then. Early part of 2017, he ordered the withdrawal from Afghanistan and then forgot about it. Right? Like, well, I could do this, or I could go golfing or whatever. Like, he's just always, like that. He's so superficial with so many things. And the good part of it, the silver lining in it all, is that he can flip-flop so hard and he can change his mind so starkly. It's enough to make your head spin. But if he's willing to stick with it, he can say the right thing and go with that. And so, I mean,
theoretically,
he is negotiating on Iran's terms now, right? Like, he even said, we're negotiating when he called the ceasefire. We're going to negotiate on their plan for coming to terms. And the MOU is virtually all their gain. All they have to do is reopen the strait, sorta, under their new rules. And we got to do every other thing in there. And so, as I was joking before that, he demands unconditional surrender one day. He unconditionally surrenders the next. It's all. The good thing about him is maybe he doesn't even realize when he's losing face, and he doesn't really give a damn because he just figures you can't tell either. So there are possibilities there, right? For him to just say, right, like a cat that slams into the screen door, that just, of course I meant to do that. Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen. This is exactly what I wanted to happen. And now I'm the greatest president ever. Boy, you thought I was better than George Washington before, but now look at this, everyone. And just go ahead and call it that. And he could do that, but he's got to be willing to do a couple of things, which is really lose face on the new status quo in the Gulf. And he's got to be willing to tell Benjamin Netanyahu, no, and I really mean it. You got to get out of Lebanon, or else my new thing cannot stand.
Yeah,
Netanyahu right now doesn't seem to be afraid. So.
No, and probably for good reason. When you take morality out of it, why would he? More on Israel in a minute. But speaking of the flip-flop, I'm not sure of the sequence of these comments. Both these sound bites, the one I just played for Trump and the one I'm about to play, or from yesterday. And I don't know which was made first, but it seems like somebody heard him say what he just did that we just played for you, where he said, I don't know. And then subsequently at a different interview, he was asked, are we going to go back to full-scale war? And this time he says, yeah, I don't need to.
It seems that the war with Iran may start again. What do you expect from your European allies?
I don't think it's going to start again. I think it's going to go very quickly. They hit a couple of ships, and so we hit them much harder. When they hit, we hit 10 times harder. I think anything that happens is going to be over very quickly, and we'll only make it safer, including for oil.
So he seems to have this idea that, look, I'm just hitting them now tit for tat, and I'll go 20-1 and I'll hit all this stuff there, and then they won't do anything, or they'll fire back and then we'll be done. So it won't go that long because he thinks that he has dominance control, or at least control over how things go. Do you think that's a safe bet with Iran?
Almost. I mean, I agree that is what's happening here, right? This is someone told me that Chas Friedman coined the phrase, it's a ceasefire with Israeli characteristics, right? So in other words, it's actually the ceasefire is not off, right? The MOU, again, that statement about the MOU being canceled was off the cuff in response to the lady's question. It was clearly not a pre-thought out policy change there. And so, yes, I think well, I'm not saying, oh, it's a safe bet that you should do diplomacy this way or whatever, but I'm saying I believe my speculation about how this is going is that the Americans and the Iranians may even have like sort of a whispered understanding that like, look, there are going to be tit for tat problems in Lebanon as well as in the Strait as we finish this process to get these talks done. But we're just going to have to do it anyway. And because Hezbollah is a little bit rogue and Iran has to make some effort to rein them in. And the Israelis, of course, are completely loco. And it would only be at the final end of the negotiations where Trump can really put his foot down and say, okay, today we're signing. And so you have to back down now. And so I sort of presume that it goes without saying that stuff like this is going to happen in the meantime. And I truly am hopeful that it will not lead to a real outbreak of war. Because again, I think the facts of life are just, they don't have any real military options there either. And by the way, the Iranians, they've already gained everything that they have to gain, right? Their new strategic position is already secured. At this point, all they get from further war is further destruction and death on their.
Well, I would argue a counterpoint that there is one other thing that they can gain, and I perceive that they may be moving down this path here. At least that's one possibility, and that is they could defeat the United States, not just get us to go away, which is what I'm arguing to this day still that we do. Just walk away and don't even worry about an MOU or deal or anything else. Just leave and declare victory and whatever, and just go home. That's the least costly way to get this done. But if President Trump tries to do this one, and now I'm going to get into the section here where I'm going to show you about what the war hawkers are pleading with him to do. If he listens to those guys and goes into to try and solve this militarily, then you could have Iran come out more than what they are now, as having seen to defeat militarily the United States and maybe even be a nuclear weapon state, because that is something they are now openly saying they are considering. So I worry that there may be the hawks in Iran who say, no, there is something else to gain. And so they have incentive not to just do the small scale tit for tat stuff. What do you say to that?
Well, look, no, because they can't sink our Navy, right? We have at least the pretension of this superior military power, and we have standoff arrangements that, reach further than theirs. Although, I mean, we're essentially at stalemate in the region, right? It's not like they can ever come to the United States of America. But I don't think they have much of a strategic position to gain by continuing on. And in fact, as far as the nuclear thing, I hope they're listening. I would counsel them to not race toward a nuke even now, because in fact, it's not really going to deter the United States. It's just going to give them license to launch a full-scale air campaign, much worse than before, and maybe terror bombing, targeting civilians en masse in order to force compliance, because that's all they can do essentially. But they're terrified of them getting a nuke. And so it would definitely signal a much worse air war, at least by the United States. But then also, if they succeeded in getting an atomic bomb, as Daryl Cooper has pointed out on our show Provoked Thursday nights here on the YouTubes and Spotify, that if Iran got a nuke, they would actually be screwing themselves, because never even mind the United States and that part of it. But right now, they're by far the dominant actor in the region, especially because of George Bush giving their friends Baghdad and Donald Trump just kicking his own self out of the region. And so they are by far the dominant power in the region. But if they get an atom bomb, then at that point, Saudi and UAE, possibly Qatar, Kuwait, they could race toward a nuke too. And And then at that point, Iran completely gives up their strategic advantage. If even little UAE has atom bombs, then they're essentially an equal peer with Iran at that point. Whereas if nobody has atom bombs and it's just a matter of conventional power, Iran is way out ahead. So that made sense to me. That
Well, the only counter to that I would have is that in that event that you just described there, you would have the identical situation you have now, because then instead of nobody having nukes, everybody would have nukes, but they still have the foul card that they can have control of the strait. And then who's going to be playing nuclear chicken when it's going to be suicide for all? Then I think you have the strategic deterrence that is, right now with the declared nuclear powers that we have this day. So. But the problem is, this is just an argument that you and I are having, but I'm telling you, I know that this is happening inside of Iran, and they're playing these things out. I don't know how it's going to work out.
Well, one of their big hurdles, right, is that how in the hell are they going to do it? Because Trump really did not exactly obliterate, but de facto obliterate their nuclear program last year. Right. That's why they haven't even hit it this year. They haven't even needed to, because Natanz and Fordo were essentially buried alive. Or buried down there. If the centrifuges are intact down there, they're still inaccessible, and certainly not without us being able to get at people if they try to reopen them. And Isfahan, the crucial conversion facility, was destroyed at Isfahan. That's how you take uranium metal, turn it into gas, which you enrich, and then turn it back to metal again. Without the conversion facility, they're just completely stranded on an island there. That's why they were willing to concede so much on February 27th before the war, Danny, is because his men were telling the Ayatollah, hey, man, we might as well give them a 5-year moratorium on enrichment, because we're not going to be able to enrich within 5 years anyway. Right. Like Trump had knocked them that far down the ladder. So to get from where they are now to a new enrichment program, a new conversion facility, and an atom bomb core without getting bombed out of business in the process, I think is a very tall order. I don't think that they can do it.
Now, I will tell you, there is a theoretical alternative. That's if everything that you have just said is true, and if that's all that's true. But last year, we had Ted Postal on the show, and he showed us some plans that he had drawn up and stuff. He said, this is what they could be doing here, because they have the capacity to, while everybody's looking at these 3 sites that are buried under the rubble, et cetera, over here where no one's looking, because now then there's no inspectors to tell anything. He said they have the capacity to rebuild these centrifuges, and it's another place. He said it could be a small place, and that's where he showed a diagram. He goes, yeah, this would be a very small footprint for it, and you have to be looking for it to even know that it might be there. Meaning they could have all this time actually had another facility. This is pure speculation, I'll say, but the technical knowledge does exist for them to replicate this elsewhere, and we just don't know. And that's part of what we'll find out later, I guess.
And look, I mean, we always argued for 20 years that their position is that, look, we have a civilian program, but we have mastered the fuel cycle, wink, wink. And so don't attack us and we won't make a nuke. But if we do attack them, then they might, right? So, well, now we've attacked them. And so now we've made it much more likely that hardliners in power will cease the decision-making and say that, no, now we have no choice but to race to an atom bomb. So you're not wrong. And when you say all this time, or I forgot your exact words, but something like that, you mean since last June, since the War of 25, because we had, or very close to right around there, we had a continuous inspection regime that could continue to verify the non-diversion of declared nuclear material. But the eyes of the inspectors have been closed, and they can no longer claim that they have an unbroken chain of custody of Iran's nuclear material. Now, by the way, there's a great Time magazine, I'm 99% certain it was Time. It might have been Newsweek, but I'm almost certain it was Time story about the decision-making process behind launching the war. And they said that after the war of June 25, Netanyahu said to Trump, oh no, now they're going to make a nuke, dude. Now that we bombed them, so now you got to go forward and you got to do the regime change. And then when he convinced Trump to go ahead and go forward in March, that then when they didn't get they did get the Ayatollah, but they did not achieve the regime change that they were hoping would spontaneously result from the getting of the Ayatollah. Then Netanyahu told them, oh no, now they're going to make a nuke. Because now that you did what I said here and you killed the Ayatollah and you basically put their back against the wall, they've got no choice now. And the thing is, he might have actually been telling the truth by then. Right? Same guy who's been lying about this for 35 years, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so we just don't know. Well, that's what the Israelis have done and probably are still doing behind the scenes. Let me show you what the war hawkers on the American side are still doing to this day. Let's start with Brother Jack Keane, because he is going to be sitting here going to do a little rewriting of history, and he's going to do a little omission. Let's see if you can figure this one out.
Even though we're dealing with different players here because we killed the other leaders, they very much represent the ideals of this regime and their diabolical, tyrannical, radical ideology. And I think that's where they are. They have had the Straits of Hormuz as their strategic objective for 47 years. And they've had 4 objectives: dominate and control the Middle East; 2, control the distribution of oil out of the Persian Gulf; 3, destroy Israel; 4, drive the United States out of the region. They have been in control somewhat of the Straits of Hormuz since March the 2nd, when they shut it down. So 4 months they have, in their minds, been in control, and they're not going to give this up without a fight. Economic pressure and diplomatic pressure will certainly be applied here, and I think they're going to stick to this and not back down. And it will likely lead to an acceleration of military operations to bend them to our will.
Bend them to our will. That's all we got to do. Even after all this stuff, he still wants to bend them to our will. But let me just start with the first one. I'm sure a lot of things already popped up in your mind, but let's get to this diabolical and tyrannical regime. Which regime qualifies as diabolical and tyrannical? Who started 2 separate wars within the span of 8 months? Was it Iran or was it one other country? What do you think?
Listen, it's the American empire and it's mini-me over there, the Israeli regime, especially this Likud regime. I guess you could argue who's in charge, really, the flea wagging the dog, as my friend Adam Heyman says. There's a lot of that, for sure. Yeah, no, and look, the Iranian regime is a very flawed republic, right? But look who's talking. And as far as popular sovereignty, I don't believe in such a thing, really, social contracts and whatever. Nobody ever asked me to sign on any actual dotted line. But you look at the actual millions of people turning out to mourn the Ayatollah, and including they took his body to Iraq for everybody to mourn him there, and then they took him back to Iran again before his final burial. You got millions and millions of people coming out to mourn this guy at a public funeral. That would never happen for W. Bush or Hillary Clinton or any of these people, Donald Trump for that matter. Nothing like that. Donald Trump said, "Oh yeah, those crowds, that's just like when people come out to speak."
I didn't see that.
10,000 people, dude. This is 1 million people at the same time, right? So I'm not saying that gave the guy, credibility, whatever, in that sense. That's not my argument. But my argument is that, remember what the war party said about all this. What the war party said was that the people, all we had to do was kill the Ayatollah and a few of the top leaders of the IRGC. And once the people realize that the jail guard essentially has been knocked over the head, they will all break out and they will all rise up and they will overthrow the government of Iran for us. And they will put in a pro-American regime, probably led by the grandson of the Shah, more commonly known as the son, but really the son was the main guy, the Shah Reza Pahlavi. And we'll just parachute him in there, maybe with the help of the Mujahideen cult, communist terrorist cult, or, some Kurdish commies from PJAK or something. And they'll go in there and somehow install a new regime, and the Iranian people will rise up and support it. And even Donald Trump said, forget that. The monarch, the Pahlavi is not my guy, and we're not doing that. We'll see what happens if there's a popular uprising. But he was sold that and I forgot if I ever remarked this on your show, so sorry if I'm being too redundant, but I think this is a crucial, important part of the propaganda about the massacres of January, where certainly a few thousand people were massacred in various protests and insurgent uprisings across the country in January. But they embellished that up into the tens of thousands. And this ridiculous propaganda campaign.
54,000 is what Trump said yesterday. So he moved it from 45,000 to 54,000.
Sure. Yeah. And as Caitlin Johnstone said, the Australian leftist, that she said, the reason that they're all over the place with these numbers is because there are no numbers. They're completely making this up. and it's completely false. And so that's why they're all over the place. But here's the problem with that. Okay, on the face of it, obviously they're just trying to jerk your chain and get you emotionally invested in. Somebody has to stop these bad men, and it should be us since we're the good guys and all of this crap, like they always do. But there was a real insidious part of that too, though, which was that the implication behind the massacre was 45, 50,000 people, whatever it was, the number that they're throwing around. It was that the regime had to massacre 40,000 people in order to get the presumably other millions of them, or hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, to give up and turn around and go home. But it was a massive popular revolution taking place among the whole populace of the country. And it took these absolute, imagine massacring 40,000 protesters. Boy, that was a big protest, right? Like, that might be what it would take to force the millions of mourners for Khamenei to go home right now, right? Millions and millions of people out there. Massacre 40,000 of them. The others will probably give up and turn around, maybe, right? That's the implication of those numbers. That was never true. It was just a few, mostly bought and paid for mercenary Kurdish groups from the fringes of the country that had no support in Tehran or maybe outside the yuppiest of the suburbs of Tehran. But you know what? If somebody, and they crowed, remember when they killed the Ayatollah, they showed video of liberals in Tehran cheering that he was killed. But you know what? If someone murdered our current president, plenty of liberals in certain big cities would be cheering out their apartment windows about how great it is. That doesn't mean that would represent the will of the people of the country, or that they would have anything like the support of the people of the country for a popular revolution to overthrow the entire government and replace it with themselves. Give us a break. They were lying. It's completely stupid. What they were trying to get away with was something much more akin to the 1953 coup than the 1979 revolution, and which, by the way, it was Jimmy Carter's deliberate decision on the advice of the National Security Council and the CIA to send the Ayatollah Khomeini, the original one, home from Paris, France, to inherit the revolution in 1979. Because the State Department and the CIA said, Danny, oh, Khomeini, we know this guy. He helped us overthrow Mossadegh back in 1953. He was part of a group of religious clerics that helped agitate against Mossadegh. We can work with him. And so this whole thing is them biting their own tail for my whole lifetime now. Man, that's I've sometimes backed it up to the 53 coup, where a lot of this stuff started, but I've actually forgotten about that part about what we did with Khomeini himself. Coming back to today, so lying is one thing. You can lie and try to get something to happen your way because you think that it can work out good. This one is a little bit harder for me to get my head wrapped around, because this is going to be a former, I think, 3-star general, somebody who was a division commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, General Keith Kellogg, former national security advisor for the vice president in the first Trump administration, and his envoy in various places during this one here. And then he's going to now argue, like Jack Keane, much more forcefully, that we need to go back to full-scale war. But, well, let me get on the backside. Watch what he says.
I'll make it really simple for you. We're going to send in the IAEA to get the enriched uranium, if we can get to it, with American advisors. And, oh, by the way, you don't get to get any restrictions. We're going to go where we want to go. Number two, we're going to open up the Strait of Hormuz, and we're going to do it militarily. If they sink a tanker, we'll take your assets, making them fungible, and then we're going to replace those assets that you lost. And number three, we're telling the Iranians, knock it off with the neighbors. You don't attack UAE, you don't attack Qatar, you don't help Hamas or Hezbollah or anybody else. The other thing is we're not negotiating as equals. Right now, we're treating them as equals. They're not. Arachi's a master negotiator. He's their foreign minister. He wrote the book on negotiations. His parents were rug merchants. They understand. Have you ever tried to buy a rug in the Middle East? You basically say, we're done with this. We're tired of it. We're not going to do it anymore, and we're going to finish the job as we should do it.
Rug dealers. That's where he wants to go with that. Listen, why would you argue? Just open the strait, just tell them to knock it off with their allies, and then that's it. We'll go in. President Trump, this is shocking to me, actually listens to this guy. by President Trump's announcement, and by Kellogg himself, and some of the stuff Kellogg has said he has subsequently done. So we can't just dismiss this as this crazy guy. But what the hell, man? What is going through the minds of people who say stuff like this when they have hard evidence that doesn't work already? Why is he going to advocate trying it again? What do you think?
We're going to build a wall. We're going to make Iran pay for it. What's the problem, man? America has obviously found a magic lamp, and we can make magic wishes, and the genie will make them all come true. And yeah, you're forgetting our obvious major strategic advantage there with the magic, Danny. No, otherwise, I'm reminded of Colonel McGregor, your colleague, and his opinion of Keith Kellogg, not very intelligent. Yeah, that's right. He does not seem to be very intelligent. And really, anyone watching that ought to be able to tell he's just blowing smoke. We cannot do any of these things. If we could, we would have already done it. That was it. Force open the strait. I guess maybe you and I are skipping a part because it just goes without saying to us, but maybe we should be more explicit about this. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, because what do I really know? You know a lot more about this stuff than me. But it seems like if we were willing to commit all of our Air Force and Navy to the opening up of the strait, and we were willing to risk all of those planes and all of those pilots and aviators' lives to do so, and we're willing to spend essentially all of our East Asian and European and whatever weapons stores to do so, like probably we could rain that kind of hell down on them. But you just have to be willing to accept all kinds of coffins coming home at Dover and all that right before the elections and all. You'd have to be willing to get into a war that would be much more destructive to American life, and obviously to Iranian life as well, to achieve that. But I think that's what Keith Kellogg is saying, right? Is that there is no price in servicemen's lives that is too high that he's not willing to pay it. And so whatever it takes, Danny, we have to achieve those goals. And Donald Trump's problem, I guess, is he's such a pansy that he was only willing to go so far, but he flinched after only 13 guys died, when he should be willing to go up to at least 13,000, maybe 130,000 to do what it takes to achieve his goals. And by the way, and because I got diverted on my rant about ancient history there and all of that, as Jimmy Carter would say, that I did not get to criticize Jack Keane. Jack Keane is the father of David Petraeus. Jack Keane is the one who said we have to escalate the Iraq war in 2007. For what end? To what end? So that David Petraeus can build the Supreme Islamic Council's Badr Brigade into the Iraqi army, so that we can solidify Iran's victory in the second Iraq war. That's who Jack Keane is. Him and Fatneck Fred Kagan and David Petraeus and Dick Cheney, they are the men most responsible for when Donald Rumsfeld wanted to quit in 2006. They said, no, let's double down. The Ayatollah Khamenei and Sistani have not finished winning yet. So General Jack Keane ain't nothing but Sistani's little errand boy. That's who the Supreme Islamic Council and the Badr Brigades are. They are the strongest armed power of Iran's best friends in the country, and have been and have ruled ever since. It's been nothing but Dawa Party and Supreme Islamic Council guys ruling that government ever since those days. And that is all on Jack Keane. And now, he's upset about Iranian power in the region. He goes, now the Iranians, they think that they can just control the strait. They've always wanted to, ever since they took over in 1979. And now, ever since March 2nd, they've taken it over. Since March 2nd, huh?
Yeah, what happened on that date? Funny if he mentions that date. What do you think?
I mean, man, George Carlin would say the solution here is simple. Crucifixions. We just get a few of these guys, we make an example out of them, the wars all come to an end.
Yeah, don't think that's quite how it worked out.